Well, thanks everyone for coming. I'd like to first acknowledge the Wurundjeri, the traditional owners of the land that we gather on today, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. We're very excited to have our second in-person Worksmith community talk tonight. We had the Future of Restaurants with Square last month, which is great. We were sort of dissecting the report that they did for the first time in Australia. They normally do it in the States. You can watch that recording actually on the Worksmith YouTube channel. The events that we do, the Worksmith Community Talks being one of them, is part of the ever-evolving calendar of events that's actually part of the Worksmith industry membership. This membership is designed for venues rather than the co-working side of things that we've done traditionally at Worksmith. And it's sort of split into two parts. There's the event side of things, which is sort of about engaging with staff, education, panel discussions like tonight. And then the second half is the buyers group, which along with our partners, we offer top tier pricing for various services and products to sort of help support venues essentially. So it's really good to see some Worksmith industry members here tonight, some newbies as well, which is awesome. Before I hand over to Danny, I just want to thank Rob and Katie and Sean for kind of looking after the show tonight, Tim as well for filming everything, and thank you also especially to Kookaburra, who've partnered on tonight's event. It's been great working with Nick and the team on putting together the event and curating it, and I'm super excited for our two panellists tonight. So I'll pass over to the more capable Danny, and enjoy everyone.
Thank you so much, Tim, and thank you to everybody here at Worksmith and to Kookaburra for supporting this event. I'm really thrilled to be here. I emceed the last event, and Worksmith is such a great space. I think it's really appropriate that we're here talking about community in a space that celebrates community, that is really built around the connections that we can forge in hospitality and the industries such as my own as a food journalist that are in and around it. So I'm not sure if everybody knows me. I do know a lot of people in the room, and it's great to be here with you. I'm a Melbourne-based food journalist, restaurant critic, podcaster, very keen eater, and I'm obsessed every single day with restaurants. Love writing about them, love eating in them, and certainly love talking about them. That's what we're here to do today with our two exceptionally talented guests. So here to my right, Kirsty Chiaplis is the owner of Babajan, an eatery in North Carlton. I think you opened in 2016. Is that right, Kirsty? And has just opened a second station for Babajan in Little Collins Street at the top end of the city. Congratulations on that. We'll certainly be talking about changes that you've made to Babajan over the past couple of years, and the fact that you have optimistically, bravely and excitingly opened a new business. Love that. Hana Kirsty is the originator, owner, the revolutionary behind the ever-changing dynamic Moroccan Soup Bar. Hana, what year was it that you first opened Moroccan Soup Bar? 1998. I mean, goodness me, can we just have a little round of applause for Hana?
How many of you were born then?
Hana, I mean, that is just exceptional. We do celebrate the new and the novel in hospitality so much, but I think it's always important to celebrate the stayers. And 2016, that's staying power as well. But what you continue to do and have done for Melbourne and various communities in the city is something that I'm so happy to honour. I think it really, I feel like it means a lot to everybody personally who touched that business, and I'm really excited to dig in with you today about the new iterations of the way you think about feeding people and gathering around food. So it's going to be a pretty good chat. I feel like together, what I want to do in this conversation is just talk about where you're at now with your businesses, what changes you've brought to them and why, and what you think it means to gather around food in an ever-changing space. Just, some little questions we're going to tackle and solve. And then, what I suppose it's always good for people to come away with ideas for themselves from these conversations. So let's also talk about lessons that you've learned and perhaps broader ideas that could be applicable to other people in their own hospitality businesses. So just laying a few challenges on you there, but I reckon we're going to be able to do that together. We'll have time for questions. And Tim, can you just give me a little hoy, because I've come clockless to this chair. So just give me a hoy when it's time to move on to questions. So let's start with you, Hannah, and just tell us about where you're at the moment with Moroccan Soup Bar. What's just happened, and why, and where it's going next.
Well, firstly, I just want to acknowledge and echo the acknowledgement made in recognition that we stand on lands of the Wurundjeri. But on top of that, for us as a business, that this commitment is to be allies to the First Nations people, no matter our causes. And obviously we work with marginalised groups of women, predominantly Muslim women, who also find themselves the recipients of social hostility, but we simultaneously have a responsibility to an allyship and to resolving the unfinished business of the First Nations people. If we are talking about communities, we need to be founded on this conversation. So for us at the Moroccan Soup Bar, we embody that in everything that we do. It's an allyship and a partnership, if you like, from practical things like paying the rent, which are initiatives that we've incorporated into the very business model. And we take that relationship in a holistic sense, a sense of community, which the Moroccan Soup Bar has been built on, is not only the recognition of the injustices from the climate emergency, the First Nations to women, but all of those things are interwoven into the very model of the Moroccan Soup Bar. And I think without kind of making this a heavy, serious conversation, I think if we can all feel invited to what sustains a business and its legacy is a very solid, strong foundation where everybody can see themselves reflected back in the business and afforded dignity and respect. So for us, that's been, I think, a foundation that we have proudly held and preserved and defended, especially when governments have been hostile to some of those values. Now, the second part of your question, I don't know if you've noticed, we're in a pandemic. Has anybody noticed this? Most governments would have us believe that it's all over and let's all snap back. And I think making us all feel a bit crazy from heavily regulating how we should respond to it and devastating and sacrificing many in the beginning of COVID, which I think we all kind of put our hand up happily, not happily, but put our hand up and went, yes, we are about the common good. We're about looking out for the vulnerable among us, only to find ourselves 2 years later with no consultation about how we've shifted to go fend for yourself, nothing to see, lifting all regulations because they are no longer popular. We've turned the pandemic conversation into such a politically fraught conversation that even masks. The pandemic has become about Dan Andrews, conspiracy theories, whatever, rather than a public health emergency that it is. For us, we, as I said, we support, the idea is to support some of the most marginalised groups of women in our community. You cannot make that claim and then ignore their welfare. These women mostly are single income households, and our quest is to empower them and circuit break their disadvantage through employment. So how do we then put them in harm's way and pretend that that is okay in any way? They don't have private health insurance. What would happen to them if, just as a matter of course, they just go to work and they will get sick 2 or 3 times a year? That's not even talking about the longer term impact of long COVID and what that may mean. So for me, if I wouldn't do that to myself, I couldn't do that to our staff. That was one of the, I think, one of the main realisations, that and many other kind of related issues, but we've never thankfully struggled for lack of staff and or lack of patrons. We've had both plentiful. But that's also a problem in an environment where there is a raging pandemic. So we decided, how do we still keep women safe, keep community engagement, and reinvent and innovate yet again where there is no roadmap. And for us, it is about right now reimagining a world where we can begin to heal some of the societal issues and keep our staff safe. So we're moving to delivery. That's new for us, new partnerships with Kookaburra, people that are like-minded, who share our values and who can enable us to flourish in a communal way, not a competitive way. And as a business model for us, that's been important. So we're going to catering, delivery, takeaway, a new location, but we're also the community engagement component of the Moroccan Soup Bar will happen in new and interesting ways, and I'm happy to talk about that a little bit later. But that's a very long-winded answer. Tom, rein me in, please. Tim, Tom, I don't know who you are. Yeah, tell me to stop.
No, well, I mean, it's probably my job to tell you to stop if I wanted to, and I didn't. I think everything you're saying is so important, and you know what you really speak to is founding a business based on values, and then you know this constant challenge of seeing the challenges in front of you through those values, and you know, I mean, it's a really brave decision to open a restaurant that is founded on this idea of creating employment for marginalised women, and then also in service of that goal, then closing the restaurant many years later, thinking that this environment isn't supporting my values anymore. So I suppose, you know, most people aren't going to make that same decision, go down that road in the same way. But I think what everybody can take from it is that you do, you know, you've got a really strong set of values and principles, and you're working out different ways to apply them in the situations as they keep changing. So I think it's really poignant. And I think it does feel to me that we're perhaps, you know, entering another stage of the pandemic. You know, winter is like, it totally sucks for COVID. And, you know, I think everyone's feeling those pinches now in various ways in their own businesses. So, yeah, I'm glad we're here together right now. Kirsty, Hannah's always a hard act to follow.
Oh, bad.
But
That was so impressive.
But
Very impressive.
you also have an amazing story. So tell us about Babajan. What's happened over the past couple of years, and you know how you've thought about creating a new iteration of it in the city.
So Babajan was created in 2016, and we had a dine-in and an a la carte menu and a full counter, which I wanted to showcase abundance and, you know, that joyful experience with a lot of food in front of you, and you know that you walked in and you were overwhelmed and you just had to have something. And then, you know, through the business we sort of worked out that there were some flaws in that model with that site, and I was, you know, trying to work out how to better the business. We did a pop-up in Lygon Street with retail, and that sort of started working, and then the pandemic hit. And we suffered like a lot of people, and we had to change the way we operated. Again, wanting to support my team was really like just trying to keep them calm and say to them, I'm going to do all I can to keep you working. And, you know, there was a lot of visa holders that wanted to stay, but just in the end couldn't. And we were tracking through that okay, but, you know, the shop was a mess, COVID was a mess, and I just wanted to try to keep some level of routine and calmness for myself and for my team. So that's why I decided I'm just going to take a risk and I'm going to renovate and just flip the model now, because I wanted it for all of us to have some level of calmness because it was so hectic, you know. And so I did that, and it worked. You know, it's working. It's good. It's good. It's a good model. It works for that site. Now we've, you know, opened up another little one, which is about, you know, it's a tiny little shop, but I'm trying to showcase our food and our retail. And, you know, the idea started in January because I had a lot of staff back then and I wanted to keep people working. And I was like, what can I do? And I thought, I think, maybe it's time to open something else. And now I don't have enough staff. So, yeah. I'll give you some. Okay, good. Yeah. Now, I'm working on, finding solutions, but it's been a risk, and I'm hoping we're not out of the woods, and, I still have bills like everyone and stresses, and business is very heavy, even in a good time, I think. And you're always expected to be on as a boss, and you're not always on. So there's a lot of layers to running a business, and I'm hoping that this works out for all of us, and I can continue to do little ones like the one in the city.
So you mentioned when you opened the space in North Carlton, it was dine-in and takeaway as well. And I well recall walking in and seeing those laden counters and that busy space and just the fragrance of cinnamon and cumin and beautiful, love it. You mentioned there were challenges with that space with the model. Is it? Because I'm thinking, is it that it was very small space and is that what it was? You just couldn't get enough bums on seats to make it work as dine-in?
I think, during the week you sort of struggled, and then the weekend was you couldn't move people fast enough, and you couldn't sit, you didn't have enough seats. But also we had an a la carte menu and counter, and the costs, were outweighing, the revenue. So, and the wages. So you always needed, a chef on one section, another chef on another section, 3 people on the floor. And then on the weekend, it was 6 people on the floor. You had 2 kitchen hands. We make everything from scratch. We're baking bread at the start for the first 2.5 years. We're doing everything. But it doesn't, it's what you want to do. You can't always do it in business. So we were losing money. Everyone was like, "Oh, Babajan's so great, and you must be so busy, and you're making so much money," but we weren't. We weren't.
I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah.
And, you're so busy, you must be loaded. Yeah, it doesn't really work like that.
Yeah. So I had to think, I had to innovate, and then COVID happened, and it sort of, I guess it helped to push that idea to say, let's just do it, and it does work better for that model, for that site.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I was going to ask you if you would have been brave enough to do that without the pandemic forcing you to move to takeaway.
Yeah.
But
I sort of started that. I was in my mind, I thought, let's try it in Lygon Street, but I didn't do coffee because I didn't want to do plumbing. So it was a really just, really simple site, and it tested the waters and it was okay. And I thought this could work. So then, took a risk. So
what lessons have you taken from that whole experience to the new place in terms of how you've set it up?
I really have thought about not doing too much and staffing levels there. I had an accountant that would always say, "Oh, maybe you should open nights and maybe you should do this." And you always trust your accountant because they know more than you. But they don't because they don't know how to run a hospitality business. They don't understand all the bits and pieces to what we go through every day. And, that's now I just think, less is more, fine-tuning what we have, trying not to overcomplicate it, even though in my heart I want to cook more and I want to change things and I would love to do this and do that, and you're always getting pushed to do more by customers or media or whatever, but you can't afford it at the moment. You just can't, unfortunately. So you have to find that sort of happy medium, I think. So that's what I'm sort of trying to stay with.
Yeah, that sounds really wise, and it's something I wanted to touch on. Is it was in the blurb for this event. It's that balance and the tension between the excitement and the creativity of doing something new and creating something for your community, but then the demands and the challenges that go with it. And Hannah, maybe you could pick that up. How do you sort of balance creativity and the demands of setting yourself up with new challenges?
I guess in 2 ways. I don't listen to my accountant at all. In fact, I didn't have one for the longest time. And in the beginning, when we set up, somebody kind of just said, "Where's your business plan? Where's your budget projection?" I went, "Well, what is that?" No. And we had a university student who was looking at alternative accounting methods and models and business models. And she was doing her PhD, and she kind of came in and asked some questions, and this is in 98, 99. And she went back to her supervisor, and we did a few meetings, and she said, your business model will not last a year. It just won't. Because our objective is not monetary. Whilst it is a sustainable business, it is not driven by the bottom line dollar. So 24 years on, we're still here. I'm just saying. And I guess our currency and how we measure success alongside, obviously, a sustainable business model is, if we were in business to make money, we would not be in business. We would not be in a hospitality business. What we find rewarding alongside a sustainable business that reinvests everything it makes back into itself, from running free events like Speed Data Muslim and engaging our community when there are tensions and hostilities, like paying the rent with First Nations, like a whole host of initiatives. We do it willingly. We do it because it's our commitment. We pay for composting when council doesn't because we care about the climate. We put solar panels on a building that we're renting. All these things are costs which we incur, and we incur because we've made a commitment to these sets of values. And for me, I've made money. I've bought a couple of properties that have gone from $80,000, I kid you not, to like $2 million. Over a 25-year period. If you want to make money, that is, but in terms of business and hospitality, for us, the business model is about sustaining its aims, its objectives, the women who come through our doors. And when, like you were saying, it's labour intensive, we also choose for, like sometimes our food will take 3 women 8 hours to prepare. I will have 8 women because it speaks to engaging women with the issues that they're dealing with, the experiences they need, the connectedness of being around each other. So we're happy to pay for the labour because it enables us to arrive at something else that we find a measure of our success. And yes, it's been a weird juggling act. Like sometimes we'll run an event and we'll make money from that event and put that back into business when the books go a bit like that and the accountant starts to scream. But outside of that, it is founded on a small profit margin, and it's a business that is rich in everything else, but certainly not monetary.
Wow. Well, I'd love to talk about community because that's what I think about when you speak about all of that, Hannah. And it seems to me that, there's this community that you both like create in your businesses, but then there's the community that you serve through what you offer them. And I just wonder, maybe Kirsty, you could pick that up. Like, how do you sort of balance the competing joys and needs of those two strands of community?
I mean, it is tough, but I mean, we have a strong community in North Carlton and North Fitzroy with our customers. But even like my team has always been like family for me because you're with them all the time. So, getting to know them and doing those long hours is really important to being connected. I find it like rewarding in a sense because, even when there is the stresses of the day, it's okay because you have got each other and you can trust that you're all going to be there. And our customers have been, long-standing throughout the 6 years, and they're still coming to, Little Collins, and they're back and forth, so they're great. Yeah, I've got a lot of cherished customers and long-standing relationships, even with William Anglis, and I think it's a network. Hospitality is a network, and you easily, if you want to stay connected, you can build really strong relationships. And I think that's how you build a strong team. They do, with visa holders, like you lose people because that's hospitality. But I think if you've built that network, like you've got a strong connection with a lot of people.
And what about in the city? You know, I mean, it's obviously a residential area to some degree, but it's mostly commercial, and that, as we know, has been, that paradigm's been shifted dramatically. How do you go about creating a sense of community in a new site in the CBD?
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised how many people do live in the city in that little spot, because in the Sheridan there's people that live in that hotel and on Spring Street. I think I create warmth with my food, with the space, with the music, with the people that I hire. Like, that's really important. That for me, that's just basics. Just to have people feel, even though it's small, I think they feel the warmth when they've walked in, or just even the lighting and the food on the counter. There's an abundance, so they feel like they're welcome. There's nothing shy. There's no timidness. It's open and it's abundant. So that's, in my mind, that's just naturally a creation, and people come,
Hannah, with Moroccan Soup Bar, the experience of being there as a customer was so profound, and I was really touched to read some of the notes that your customers had written on napkins over the years, that, in stories like, the 17-year-old who'd been there for every single birthday. I mean, and those sort of in-person events that you did, like Speed Date a Muslim, which if people haven't heard of that, it's like that there's some Muslims sitting at tables and you can go around and ask them stuff, and each person in that conversation can be challenged. I mean, just like great ideas that really dismantle prejudices and bring people together. And I just wonder, now that you've closed the North Fitzroy restaurant, you've moved to a space for cooking but not so much for gathering, and you want to move to this delivery and takeaway model. I mean, frankly, I'm a little bit frightened about all those webs of interconnectedness and community that you created over the decades. I mean, what happens to them? How do you feel about continuing with that connection that I know is so important to you in such a dramatically different mode of operating a business?
So for me, it absolutely is a bittersweet kind of, and the way I try to understand it is, when your child reaches a certain age, it's time for them to go. And no matter how you feel about it, no matter how attached, no matter how you say one more day, one more week, it is time. And for a whole host of reasons, the backdrop, the pandemic and everything else that's happening meant that it's time. So for the food part, we're keeping our staff safe, absolutely, as safe as is humanly possible, mitigating risk. I yell and scream every day, please put a mask on, please put a mask on. So we haven't had any staff get COVID through work. So that is an achievement. Neither have we had any of the women in our employment go back to violent situations, that they've all maybe left a situation of crisis and disadvantage, and through their employment over the years have certainly transitioned to, hopefully, somewhat better circumstances. So they're two things that for me are a measure of how are we connecting with the women and with our communities. So whilst now we're placing the women in spaces that still enable and empower through employment, and reaching our communities in terms of food through delivery and the partnership with Kookaburra, which is new and innovative, we're also running conversation salon events where, and I think for me, some of the frustrations being in hospitality in the last 2 years was we found ourselves, instead of engaging with the social issues like same-sex marriage, the climate emergency, resolution with treaty, instead of all of that, the pushback was about masks and vaccinations, and people that came in wanted to have a go at you and I'm going, it wasn't me. I don't make the rules, buddy. Like, go take it out. And we're in North Fitzroy. North Fitzroy was particularly a tricky, bizarre. It had a bizarre perception and relationship to the masks and to the vaccine and to the whole conversation. Now, we're all women, and I was not wanting to put women in harm's way, where every day, without exception, because we're a destination place as well, we had people come from everywhere, and every day you will have an incident. Somebody will have a go about not wanting to wear a mask, and you've got no right legally to ask me for my vaccination stat. That became tiring. It became really exhausting and almost, I don't know what the word is that I'm looking for. In terms of meaning for why we do what we do, that is certainly not it. And then the benign, people come together and just take an Instagram shot and just go, well, that's the meaning of life. So we're no longer engaged with the real stuff. Having said that, I just posted on Instagram, guys. Just so.
Devastating comment, Hannah.
But where people congregate and where people come together and places and spaces of hospitality are opportunities for us, I believe, to be able to begin to heal some of the social fractures which have happened over the course of almost 25 years. Even in my time in hospitality, I've seen a society go from being curious about one another's differences. And yes, difference has always been a thing. Sexism has always been an issue. Racism, even where we do it because it's quaint and we're picking on the new arrivals, whatever. But there was a mood of curiosity about our differences. That changed over 25 years. And I feel like I'm the surrogate aunt of an entire generation that I've seen grown. I feel like I'm their mother almost. I have boundary issues, clearly. And with that, feel compelled to address some of these issues, because if we don't, who will? We've more and more seen governments polarise people, be populist, divide our communities. We are neighbours. Once upon a time, people would look at you curiously, who are you and what do you do? All of a sudden, that conversation turned into fear. And when we're peddling this level of fear, we all become constricted and we no longer are open to wanting the best and to be enriched by our diversity and difference and all those things. So community engagement for us at the Moroccan Soup Bar through the pandemic became really difficult, and if and when we had to rethink how to do it in a creative way. So we created these little dining rooms, 4 or 5 different themed dining rooms, and invited people to engage with, again, quirky, crazy, peculiar ways, the social issues which are emerging, which were and are about, in our experience, the relationship between men and women, and women pushing back against men for toxic masculinity, men pushing right back in not knowing how to be, and that there weren't the spaces for us to come together and reimagine a world where healthy intimacy and relationships could be defined by our communities. So we created a room for that conversation over dinner. So we serve you dinner and we have the conversation through quizzes and conversation starters, etc. We created a room, the garden room, and its symbolism was about the climate and how do we all do one thing differently today, which will change and have a profound impact, a positive impact on the climate, without much difficulty. And, you know, we'd invite people to consider plastic bottles. You pay for water twice as much as you pay for a litre of petrol, and we do it willingly. It is insane. So when we have those conversations, people kind of go, oh, yeah. Straws, the use of straws, we don't need them, and where they end up. So those conversations, people really were hungry, pardon the pun, for platforms and places and spaces to engage in issues that meant something to people. We also had a room that talked about privilege and responsibility, and another room that talked about... Anyway, so the upshot in this new iteration, and that was established during COVID, we got kicked out of our main place, which we'd been at for 22 years, because the landlord said pay or go. No matter what governments were saying, landlords still did what they wanted to do. And we used the crisis as an opportunity, like we do every crisis, and reinvented these themed dining rooms. Now that we've closed the Moroccan Soup Bar, we want to take those themed conversations and offer up a banquet of food, not for Instagram shots, but alongside a banquet of ideas, where we engage with these themed conversations which strengthen our humanity and connect us back up with our humanity. And they will be run across Melbourne in a pop-up setting or capacity with inspirational speakers, performances, and invite people to engage with the stuff that is unsettling us and the stuff that's impacting us all. So that's the new version of community engagement and delivery. And I'm sure Danny will say it in a more succinct way.
Well, I don't need to because you said it
in 2 words.
I think probably a lot of people that work in hospitality or run any small business could relate to this idea that you get distracted by things that are thrown at you rather than the way that you want to deliver hospitality or whatever it is. So this idea that, you're telling someone to put on a mask when you'd really rather talk to them about, or, just express, I don't know, a different way of relating to them as a person, and just, I guess, your human project is distracted by rules that are not of your making. I think we can all get distracted in small business by things that just seem to be pulling us away from what we see more as our core. And all power to you. I can't wait to come to the salons. Kirsty, I wonder if you could talk about, you've obviously thought so hard about the way that you deliver hospitality, and it's been a really tricky time as a leader and as someone who's nurturing people both with food and with jobs. I wonder, could you talk a bit about how it's impacted you personally? Like, what have you learnt about yourself? What have been some of the real pressure points and successes for you?
Hospitality and business has been very hard. I've lost, I opened Babajan in 2016, lost my father. So I was trying to get a business going and support other people in that creation, plus go through my own grief. Trying to build business and keep people, connected was really tough. Also was in a very toxic relationship at the start of building my business.
Not with me.
No, but when you talk about toxic masculinity and there's been lots of, I feel like sometimes when you're the boss, people forget that you're human. While you're trying to build something, you have all these ideas and you're trying to create connection and community and a network and a business and pay your bills and do all these basic things. You're going through these challenges as well. So, I've learned a lot about myself. I've had to step back a lot. I also, lost my mother 2 months ago. It was the same thing. I've just opened another shop while she was, dying. And, again, you have a team that you're relying on to just keep things moving for you. So you need that network and you need people to support you. But I also find, people forget that you just had that experience and you are still there. Like, that's your job. You have to support them. Like, I have to do it. So you have to put your own stuff aside. So sometimes hospitality is very damaging sometimes because you can't put yourself first. You can't think about yourself, and being a boss, you can't do those things. So I guess I've learned to sort of always, step up, put your things to the side because life goes on, and I'll be able to deal with things later for myself. But yeah, it's a constant roller coaster, business and hospitality, because you have to show that face, that you're up and you're happy and you're, but there's always lots going for everybody, I think. But when you're the leader and people are at you to make a decision, like even just today, there's 4 or 5 people in the kitchen and I'm trying to train my ops manager to train the new barista to, go to the Babajan Bible, look at this. Like, don't ask me that question. Put it on the wall, la, la, la. And then the kitchen hand's asking me, did I cut this right? And then I've got a beautiful Syrian lady working in the back making amazing baklavas, and she can't speak very good English or write English. So she's going, can you check this? And da-da-da. So I'm stop starting. I'm still cooking. You know, like it's a hectic day. It's not an easy day. Your mind's constant. So you don't have time to really put yourself first. And I think that's a challenge in business and in hospitality.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, actually, I want to say
there's a lot.
Yeah. Well, I actually feel like pausing for a moment and saying, thank you to both of you for being here, and thanks to everybody. This isn't the end, but I'm just saying, like, we should all acknowledge ourselves for taking the time to come to something like this, where it is just like getting out of the day to day, and just taking the time to think about other things, perhaps open ourselves up to new ways of thinking and different conversations. It's actually really valuable and important.
I think patience is really important, like, for everyone to have in a work environment, to be thoughtful of where everyone's at, because that doesn't always happen.
Do you feel that in this period when things have been so raw and a lot of people's troubles in business and in life have been exposed in a different way, that it's been any easier to show that emotion or that difficulty, whether it's to your staff or to customers?
I'm probably more open now. Yeah, I think I've learned to just say I'm not good. Like, when sometimes you can't help yourself, you just cry and you don't. Everyone has said to me, you can't show that you're upset or you're angry. You got to, hold your shit. But now I'm like, I got to go. Like, I got to go. I'm no good to them. Like, it's the same with your child. If you're not doing well, you can't give them your best. So and most of the time they manage. They can do it. Your team are fine.
Well, I think through that vulnerability, you also create empathy, don't you? Where if people know you're struggling, if they don't know you're struggling, they can't do anything about it. They may not be a mind reader as much as we would like them to be. But sometimes it is about being vulnerable, and that's really scary, especially as a business owner. And I think especially in hospitality, which is all about creating those seamless, magical experiences for people. So I think it's great if you're able to be a little more open. Not that I'm your counsellor, and just do what feels right for you.
It happens sometimes without you. You just
totally. Well, are we? How much time have we got, Tim? Oh, amazing! That's so good. Great. We can ask some more juicy stuff. I think we've talked a lot about, changes that you've made because circumstances have driven you there. But I think, we've all had to deal with so much uncertainty. And I just wonder if you could talk about that, perhaps, Hannah, pick it up. What place does uncertainty have in running a business? Do you have to be afraid of it? Can you let it drive you? What sort of, philosophical underpinnings can you bring to that?
I think we start from the premise that everything's uncertain, absolutely everything. You simply, and I think especially there's another layer as women who traditionally don't occupy these spaces. Maybe we are more so now. But in terms of we don't have the mentoring, we haven't had these pathways mapped out for us, you're taking a massive risk backing yourself and your own quirky vision and hoping for the best. The rest is absolutely uncertain. And on top of that, I guess for me, even 24 years with, by any measure, a very consistent, predictable snaking queue around the corner every day, the capacity of the space is full. Even with that, the level of gratitude every day and the uncertainty for what the next day is going to bring, that is embodied in everything we do. And I think uncertainty can and should be harnessed and is something that can allow and enable us to evolve in a way that we otherwise wouldn't. It can give you creativity to innovate, as well as back yourself when things are a bit crazy, because we started doing some things around, I think one of the first times I spoke publicly in the middle of dinner service, the place is bustling and crazy, and I just went ding, 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 and everyone just looked at me like you are now. And then I thought, shit, I better say something smart. And this was all around same-sex marriage, that the government decided, and we were probably 18 years on. How many years has... anyway, so there was a young rainbow child who walked in tears, and I'd known them, like they're regulars, and I know their parents. And I said, what's the matter? And they said, oh, today at school there was, this sign saying vote no. And they were devastated and they were beside themselves. And I thought, you come here. Ding, ding, ding. And everyone just looked at me. I just went, and my heart is going, talk about uncertainty. I'm just going, this is embarrassing. What am I going to say? So I said, welcome to the Moroccan Soup Bar. Gather your thoughts. That society is now asking us to cast judgment onto one another, onto our families, onto our friends, that this is called progress, that there's nothing progressive about us being enabled to judge somebody else who's not like us. We can think no matter what we think. You can think no. But if you want to be afforded dignity and respect, you need to vote yes and afford it to somebody else. And this little kid would probably stand a little bit taller. And so this woman then said, excuse me, this is totally inappropriate over dinner. And my heart started going, oh my God. So I walked up to her. I'll act it out. And I went, madam, I know you're not a madam, but I said, madam, you've clearly not eaten at the Moroccan Soup Bar before. And I'm quickly trying to think, what am I going to say to this woman? I said, at the Moroccan Soup Bar, you pay for the conversations. The food is free.
Mic drop. Don't drop it.
And so the point about uncertainty and the point about backing yourself and the point about revisiting the very values of why we do what we do. And I think now those things are more important than ever, and they can be whatever it is. Like for me, these are our values. So we simply come back to them every time there's uncertainty and there's a crisis. For others, it may be something else entirely, but for us, they've never let us down. As women, uncertainty is a go-to for us.
I mean, one thing that I took away from your answer just then, Hannah, is that you, at one moment in your life, weren't sure what you were going to say.
I wasn't sure. No, I don't.
Kirsty, what about you and uncertainty? Is it something to fear? Does it drive you? How do you deal with it?
It's very fearful. I think it's a constant. I think as a woman, as a chef, in the industry, you've always been fearful of your place, how you drive yourself. I've had to push harder than, any other man in the kitchen, for nearly 30 years. In business, I'm fearful every day because it is, I'm grateful every day for if it's busy or, if I've got all my staff come in, like I'm just happy that, we got through the day because for me, I don't take anything for granted, even if it's one good week and then I'm worried about the next. I'm always thinking, I just want to keep doing what I'm doing and hopefully we get through. I'm never sure. I'm never sure.
Well, I wonder then, what is it that drives you? Why do you want to serve people your beautiful food?
I've been cooking since I was like 14. I've been cooking all my life. I've got a beautiful little boy that he's my life, and I just I've adopted him. He's my sister's son, and I want to give him the best life. I've had a disjointed family that I want to recreate a family and I want to recreate a good life for us. So I work really hard and that's all I know. And yeah.
I mean, it doesn't get more profound than that. I think it's so beautiful. Let's go to questions in a moment. But before we do, I'd love each of you just to talk about something yummy that you've been cooking or eating, or that you, if I came to your place, you'd feed me. Tell me. Do you want to start, Hannah?
Sometimes I think the simplest things, and it really depends on whether I'm feeling melancholy or longing for mum, or both my parents have passed in business, and we have a weird chosen family. So I love the idea of just flinging open the fridge and making something new every single time. And I think because I've been vegetarian for the longest time, experimentation is just part and parcel of how I do stuff. But I put nectarine and basil together, and that was amazing. Nectarine, basil, a little bit of ginger. I know you're looking at me like, whoa. Absolutely, it was seriously, and then you puree it onto a vanilla ice cream. It was, mwah. Anyway, that's my little...
All right, I'm
marrying up
definitely
things,
coming over for that.
marrying up things that you don't normally put together.
I reckon I want to put the nectarine on the barbecue just briefly. I think that could be good too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right, Kirsty, what you got for me?
With the weather the way it is now, I'd definitely get a shoulder all cut up, still on the bone, and I'd braise it off and just do that traditional Greek dish, krithiraki, with the risoni and just crumbled feta. So it's just baked in the oven, and just, it's one of those dishes that is perfect for today.
Is there a vegetarian version?
Well, yeah, you don't need the lamb. You could do krithiraki and do, smoked eggplant over the top, caviar, or, heaps. Yeah, you know what to do. Sorry, I shouldn't have said the lamb.
I've got to say, how good is risoni? How good's risoni at just soaking up flavours and juices?
Yeah.
And
I also do a mushroom pilaf with risoni with dates and fennel and cardamom, and that's really good too.
That sounds very, very good. Who has got some questions for Hannah and Kirsty? Yes, Nikki at the back.
So I've got a question about the both of you, about how you work. It's maybe a bit twofold. So it's about, how do we collectively in the hospitality industry work towards the systemic change that's necessary to create a more nourishing, nurturing environment for our self-care and for our staff? And then how do we work with future employers as well so they can do the same?
I think, the industry's tarnished. I think our industry's tarnished. It's going to take a lot of work. I don't have the answers. I think hospitality has been burnt by the government by cheapening, our training schemes, and it's hard to instill, the passion back into the industry. I think it's going to start from like a really young age. I think it's going to start from schools and educating young people about food again, so they want to be in the industry, so they're not forced, so they are happy to be there, and then we're happy to have them, and then it's just a better environment. But I think it's going to take years for us to really get the industry back into a passionate place. There's a lot of passion still, there's a lot of people still, but I've seen, massive decline in, people wanting to be a part of the industry. So, sometimes we're forcing people into it. We have been, and they don't want to be there. So it makes it sort of, a tricky environment when there's a job to do and they don't really want to be there, and you're sort of...
Well, they're usually not connected to the vision and purpose. Often the industry itself is very, talk about toxic, the bullying that happens, the pressure in kitchens, it's horrendous. And oftentimes we throughput people that are going to school who need to pay their bills, that aren't committed, don't care. So we've departed from the very meaning of hospitality for the longest time. And we idolise people like Chef Ramsay, who screams at people. You just go, how is that even okay? So I think the answer is you create a very different environment. And when I say, and I'm certainly not blowing our trumpet, but when I say our staff don't leave, they don't leave. I want them to leave. And part of, we want to transition them out so we can make room for more. And often we have many more than we need. But because the environment you create is a supportive one. And I think we don't have to emulate what's out there. Yes, we can creatively think about the training and how it applies to a culture that you create inside your workplace. And that culture has to respect, like for me, I'm simply a mouthpiece of a workplace where I've had the privilege to walk alongside some of the most extraordinary women and community, and we allow them to shape half of them, I kid you not, I don't speak their language, they don't speak mine in terms of literal language, but we communicate in other ways. And kindness and compassion need to be brought back into these spaces, a sense of meaning where people can just resonate with why they're doing what they're doing, instead of it's a means to an end just to make money so I can buy the next Versace bag or whatever it is. It's that stuff maybe works for others, but I think re-engaging people, and especially this next generation, they are much more committed to a better world. And if your spaces can resonate as that vision, they will come, and they want, and they're not silly, they want something that is a bit more meaningful. And I think these are opportunities for hospitality to really harness that energy and creativity with the next generation.
I think I know I'm just the MC, but I'll also answer that question. I think it's a lot about storytelling. I think it's about creating perception or expressing the reality of value that exists at every point along the supply chain. So it's about customers being willing to pay the true cost of creating that experience, and that includes, that the farmer is paid enough to look after the soil, that the transport worker is paid enough to care about the way the food is transported, et cetera, et cetera. So, and that, the art of cooking that food, the art and the toil of cooking that food and of delivering it to a table or to a doorstep is valued, so that people can really understand the way that they're connected right back to the soil with every mouthful of food that they take. Because if you don't value it every step along that value chain, you also can't respect it. And I think the fact that hospitality as an industry isn't respected as much as it might be is a real part of the problem. Prices it's really hard to raise prices. Of course, it's also hard for some people to pay prices that rise, but there are ways that you can create less expensive meals, like as you have always done at Moroccan Soup Bar, and using less meat is often part of that. That's just one way of doing it. So to me, I think, short answer, it's about storytelling, and it's about everybody that works in hospitality understanding the beginning and the end of what they do, from where the food comes from to what happens to it, the part of it that isn't eaten, where does it go to next, and then telling that story to your customers and potential customers. Any more questions? Whoa, okay.
Lots of communication, lots of sit-downs, lots of chats. There was, I've got one girl, she's finishing up shortly because I feel like she has struggled. I remember having a chat with her after she'd finished. She'd had a holiday in December, so after Christmas was hectic, came back, was just not herself. And, I said, what's going on? I think you just have to keep talking to your team and just naturally just touching base all the time and having an eye on them to say, you don't seem okay today, do you want to have a chat? Because we haven't done anything sort of, going to let's go to the GP or anything, but making, just checking in on her and making sure, like, are you drinking every day? Like, are you like basic sort of healthy things, do you need to have the day off? Like, you don't need to come to work today. Like, there's just basic things that I do for my team, because I think she's on the outside, she's happy. You would say everyone would say, she's so happy all the time, but she doesn't open up, and she's not she's struggled with the transition. She's struggled with, being in a relationship that was started in COVID, and she was working every day. So there's always a story behind all of your team. So I just chat all the time. Just, have a little chat. Make sure she knows I'm there. That's all I do.
For us, part and parcel of working at the Moroccan Soup Bar means we have conversations about everything, about mental health, about domestic violence, about struggling financially, about somebody needs Xanax, we find a psychiatrist, whatever it is. And we normalise those things by talking about them, as you do. And I think when the pandemic first hit, we work with a community who didn't trust government messaging. And in fact, the government has vilified these people for the longest time. And all of a sudden the government's going, trust us. And they didn't. They just went, this is bullshit. There is no pandemic. They want to control us. It's conspiracy. So I went and got a scientist and had all our staff sitting down and explained what the pandemic is, what the difference between a virus and a bacteria is, what is happening, so that they can then go home and look after their children, and often a lot of them had children, and feel equipped and armed with the proper tools to understand how to navigate this crisis. So from there, they would then, because they were all absolutely, if you talk about an anti-vax community, they would have been anti-vax because they don't trust. And the government didn't reach across to those communities that it's marginalised. And instead, they were left to their own conspiracies. People tell people on Facebook, where did you do? Oh, I did my research on Facebook. What? So we find ways and means of delivering information based on, we talk about all issues, anorexia, obesity, diabetes, all those issues that racism, which often, have no place in hospitality. And just a little bit to your point, people know when I'm pissed off. Like, yeah, I'm the head of the place, but when I come in and when people come in and I'm grumpy, they go, damn, we'll just order and not look at it. So I think for me, I'm transparent, and people see when we're happy, when we're elated, when we're tired, when we're exhausted. And I know they don't come to see that and experience that, and we try, but at the same time, we're human. And I think showing other staff that it's okay to be human is also an important legacy in changing the culture of hospitality.
There was a question over here somewhere? Yes.
I don't know how I do it. I'm crazy. So I guess I'm an opportunist. I see something that I can't sit on the fence. I can't sit and watch things be a mess. Or if things aren't working, I'm a problem solver. That's just who I am. I see something, I have to fix it. That's not always a good trait. I don't sleep a lot, I'm really, just always driving. I'm always thinking, I think naturally. And I don't think it's not normal. That's normal for me to think this way. It's not, this is just how I work. I'm up, I'm moving, I see a problem, I fix it. I see something that needs to be better, I'll change it. That's just who I am.
What about you, Hannah?
I think everyone has their thing in life. and trying to kind of look inward and find what that thing is. For me, it's always been social justice. And no matter whether I'm in a forum like this, in hospitality, sitting behind a desk, it doesn't matter. And staying connected to that thing will give us the bold, brave convictions that you need. Oftentimes we try and emulate somebody else and go, well, okay, so society said you need to be a doctor to be successful. Well, if that's not your thing, no, you're not going to be bold, you're not going to be brave, you're in fact going to hate it, even if you study and succeed at it. So for me, it's about looking inward, finding that barometer and finding your thing that drives you. And from there, conventions have never served me well. I don't know if you've noticed. And so I've learnt independence and self-reliance from a very young age. And that coupled with the drive to justice and facilitating a somewhat better outcome for anybody you come across. And that is, for me, the drive. So coming back to yourself a little bit.
I think it would also, it could also propagate further fruit if other businesses take on some of these values and apply them in their own scenarios. And hopefully, I'm sure you both inspire people every single day. Yes?
If I can, I'd love to ask a question about leadership. So you both have very successful businesses, and I think it takes a good leader to lead a good business. How do you think your leadership has evolved in the last 6 or 24 years? And what do you think a good leader is?
My leadership has evolved, and I probably wasn't very good at the start. I've been in business for about 10 years because I had a business before. I was still, building confidence in myself. So I think for me, I've grown to communicate better, be calmer. I'm a lot calmer now. I don't panic as much when something happens. I sort of have I've lowered my expectations. So if something does happen, I don't lose it anymore. I guess maybe because you've seen it, maybe, you've gone through it. I guess that's part of life. So I think I try to bring people, if I see in the space where people are starting to rise and you can see that they're nervous or it starts getting busy, I just try and bring people down. I just come, it's all good. We've got this. I'm just constantly trying to get people back into sort of a calm sort of mental space so we can operate. So instead of trying to elevate that momentum when you can see something could go wrong or they're not feeling well, so for me, I've become a lot more patient. And I think that's a really big thing as a boss. You got to give people time to grow, and I think right now we need to give people a lot more time to learn. Even with my team training other people, I'm like, we don't have another choice. We need to be patient. We need to take our time. Everyone's different. That's probably the one thing that I've taken.
It might surprise you to hear me say this. We lead from behind. And having said that, I'm always in front and everywhere in public, but it is about lifting others to be the better version of themselves. And I think also absolutely having learnt to calm a little bit. But I think it's a personality thing. I can't be calm. I'm not made as a calm person. It's like, oh, come on. I'm energetic, but Yeah. And just learning that each person brings something really special. You just have to, sometimes there are many, many layers. You have to work with them to try and find it. And I think the best leader is somebody that can bring out the best in everybody that's around them. And to me, often if you go to the Moroccan Soup Bar, you don't think I'm their boss, you think they're my boss. So, and I want to change that actually, and I don't know how to, but because I go, yeah, you go, you just no, anyway. So yes, the hierarchy isn't there, but the responsibility is. if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I reckon I should give you time to mingle, eat some cheese, have some homegrown, which is on tap and very delicious. Will you join me in thanking our inspiring, courageous panellists? Thank you so much, Hannah. Thank you so much, Kirsty. I hope you've all got something to take away in your own businesses and lives from these amazing women. A real privilege to be sitting up here with you. Thank you again, Tim, and everybody at Worksmith for hosting us. Thank you to Kookaburra for supporting this chat. It's been a real pleasure to be here with you. Let's get some cheese.